So it's nice to kind of hear that song, actually. It's been a few years. And that's just how we might be thinking about, the good old days, whatever those days are in your imagination. Are we going to be getting them back again soon? We've been hearing conflicting testimony on that, mostly that there is some good news coming in 2010, but there are a lot of wild cards out there, too, and some of those could get played in just the right way, and we could be back flush again. Or, if we don't get the cards the way we need them to, we're going to get stuck. And how can you be prepared either way? That's what this show is all about. Knowledge is power, and Robert Chapman has a lot of that. He is the owner and editor of the International Forecaster, and we'll see what he has to say about business, finance, economics, and socio-political issues in 2010, next on Coast to Coast. This is Ian Punnett. Well, Robert Chapman, it's nice to get to know you here. As we've done this show before, always like to bring in new voices, and especially somebody who has the depth and breadth of experience that you do. How do you describe your resume, Robert?
Very varied and sort of worldwide in nature.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at some of the subjects that you feel comfortable talking about, and it makes me want to go a little bit into some areas that we haven't gone to already tonight, or at least only touched on, like terrorism in 2010, which came up in the first hour, but we really haven't talked about it much, and some of the economic implications of that. How comfortable would you be when we're talking about that type of socio-political happenings around the world?
No, relatively so. I think that any event is disrupting. The question is, where does it come from and what's the intent?
Well, because what we see is, for example, I mean, we are putting a lot of investment in Afghanistan and Iraq. We're hoping that we're going to be able to get something back from that, and that there'll be more peace and more stability, and that will lead to, at least in some people's estimation, more security when it comes to oil. Do you anticipate a stable oil economy for 2010?
Well, I think they're looking for a geopolitical platform. I think they do a lot better if they were able to subsidize the Afghan drug growers, which is the poppy, and which eventually becomes heroin, and it would give government more credibility. But when you can go on the internet and look at photos of U.S. military personnel wandering around the poppy fields, you kind of wonder, are they running things, or are they guarding it, or are they just visiting it?
Right, yeah. I think we do need a bigger caption, I think, on those photos to explain that. So as we enter into 2010, then, how do you feel about the U.S. dollar? We've heard discussions tonight about how it's going to be faltering in 2010, although not everybody can agree on when or whether or not the government will do more to try to prop it up. What do you see?
Well, I see that government, and particularly the Federal Reserve, which is privately owned, they are in a box, and they have been for a long time. And the ultimate price that has to be paid is either the economy is stabilized by stimulus programs of one form or another, or in that process, if they do support, which they have been, what will happen is that the dollar will go down, and we've seen that. We saw a top last May of 89.5 on the USDX index. That index is 6 currencies, majors, weighted against the dollar. And so it went down to 74. It's now back up to 78. You might call it a rally. Why are they having the rally? Primarily because there have been problems in other countries such as Dubai.
Right.
And now we had rating drops in Greece,
right.
And we know that they're coming in
Spain.
And Greece is part of the Eurozone,
Right.
as is Spain, Ireland, and Italy. And so the question arises, are any of these countries going to drop out of the euro? And they may very well do so. What's the alternative? Well, the other large currency of the world is the dollar. So the excuse for a dollar rally. I don't think it's going to continue to go about what it's doing on this rally. And the reason why is that the underlying problems of credit crisis and stimulus are still going on.
Do you think we will ever see 89 on the USDX again?
Well, again, it's difficult, but I don't think so. The damage is horrific. I mean, we've got just in the last year, the Fed and the Treasury combined have put debt into the system equaling about close to $13 trillion. And that's a lot of money.
Right.
And credit. And so what they want to do is start drawing it back out and eventually raise interest rates, bringing back normality. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think that the pressure on the dollar is going to continue. They can't take the money back out of the system, because if they do, the deflationary undertow will surmount or overcome the amount of money and credit that they poured into the system.
So how low do you think the dollar could go in 2010?
It's a possibility of 40 to 55.
Wow.
It's hard to say. It depends upon a lot upon events, and we don't know what those events are going to be. But I think on a fundamental basis that it could be easily assumed that 71.18, the former low, would be broken, and I think we could easily see 55 or 60. And if that happens, there's a good chance that there could be an official devaluation of the U.S. dollar over the next year and a half, and that would really disrupt things. But I think it's an inevitability.
So, where was the dollar, if you remember, when we entered into this new millennium? Where were we at 2000? Where at one point we were doing a lot to pay off our debt, and we had a much more balanced economy. Where was the dollar then?
Well, the dollar, in regard to the USDX, had a high of 124.
In what year?
So at 74, it's come down a considerable amount over that period of time. The real trouble started about 6.5 years ago, and that's when the U.S. government started pouring money into the system via the Fed. And unfortunately, all the other central banks followed. And so they've been doing the same thing, some to a greater degree, some to a lesser degree. Now, we'll take the euro as an example. It had a high of 12.8, and that 12.8% increase in money and credit was the top. Right now it's around 3.7
right.
for the euro. We've been averaging for 6.5 years around 14%.
But just look at that then. If you're right and we could see something, let's just say around 50 on the USDX for the dollar sometime in 2010, I mean, that's about half of where we were just 6.5 years ago.
That's correct. And, you know, if you take 50 and go to 100, which is a double, you're looking at probably a 30% reduction in the value of the dollar before the end of the year is out, or at least within the next year and a half. And you have to remember as well that right now 61.8% of all foreign reserves held by foreign countries are held in the form of U.S. dollars. And incidentally, in the last 6 months, that's down from 64.5%. So it shows you that central banks have been dollar sellers. They're anticipating this.
And so where does that put you in terms of precious metals?
Well, I think that it's going to be reflected in part in precious metals, but there's two things driving precious metals. The main one is presently a flight to quality. And what has happened is that central banks and other financial professionals, in part, have lost confidence in the ability of central banks to handle a problem. And when you have a loss of confidence, you have a loss of trust as well. And so they have been going to gold and silver related assets in one form or another in order to hedge any possible problem in the future. You have another school that's not as prominent at the moment, and they think there's going to be inflation. Now, the U.S. government and other governments lie about their inflation.